Aloha, and welcome to another episode of the Groundswell Origins podcast, where I connect you to outstanding humans and sustainable ideas. I'm your host, Scott Martin. And today, we're going to paddle in with David Allison. He's a human values expert, speaker, and author on value graphics, which is this huge research study that he's done and published several books, and recently just came out with the book that we're going to talk about called The End of Demographics, which is really highlighting that we're entering into this values-based economy. And it's a pretty cool, in-depth discussion about this huge shift that's, I think, is going to rock the advertising and marketing industry in terms of how we target, how we think, and how we interact with our audiences. So without further ado, let's paddle in.
Thank you. Great to be here. Thanks for having me over.
And we're laughing because the first intro I did was a little bit mumbly. So now this is kind of a take two. We actually originally were recording and my internet was suffering. And now we've had like this it was an hour long in-depth discussion that I kind of wish we recorded. So we're going to pick up as best we can from the beginning. But one of the first questions I want to ask you is, we were just talking about dealerships and automotive. And one of the things that I did, I'm curious if this has lines with what you're talking about and today's topic of values, is I recognize that when we did a campaign with these Skidoo dealers and their audience, and we struggled to get them to get engagement, but then we came out with the thing called the Bacon Awards, and it suddenly sort of gravitated. And I think it's because these backcountry sledders are like, you get us. Is that like an embodiment of what people value, or is it just like, is there like what, like when people think of common passions, is that a value or is it something else?
I'm having a hard time following along because I don't know what the awards were for. Tell me who got the award and what they had to do to get it.
Yeah, it was just like a social media award when they actually would submit their images and you give them Bacon Award. It was just like sort of like 3 bacon, 4 bacon or something.
Oh,
And it was just it landed really well with them, right? They're like, oh, this is cool. I think we tried before like stars or trophies and nobody did anything. But then when I gave it the Bacon Awards, it suddenly hit.
yeah. So there's some values behind that for sure. One of them is probably going to be about relationships. They felt like they were part of something bigger than just themselves because other people were seeing what they were doing and they felt connected to each other. So that's a big driver for many people across many parts of the world. The other one that's probably coming into play there is something to do with social standing. So, certain people respond really well to making sure that everybody else knows where they sit in the pecking orders that they care about. And so there was probably a little bit of both of those going on there. With digging a little bit deeper, we probably find a few more, but it's a good example of how, what you think is driving people to do stuff and what's actually driving people to do stuff are two different things. I think, at a surface level, you'd probably sat back and went, they think this is funny. It's bacon. Like who doesn't think bacon's funny and delicious? And so that's all good. But it's really about wanting everybody else to see where they sit. And perhaps this idea around connectivity, I'd say relationships, or maybe even community. That's another one of our values, is just feeling like I'm part of a crew that's all, connected to each other for one reason or another.
Yeah, I think that's what came out of the brand Basecamp that we created, was about community. When you've written this book, so I got an advanced read of this book, and that's why I jumped right into this example, because that one was always puzzled me. Is the one thing I recognize from, and I think I want to share with the audience a little bit about the background of the book, is how unbelievably surprising some of this information cannot be so front and center and obvious. But when you think of values, because we're so ingrained in thinking demographics, and your book is called The Death of Demographics, Value Graphic Marketing for a Value-Driven World. If you could describe a little bit about the book and then how this is going to disrupt everything.
Yeah, sure. For millennia now, we've been using demographics to identify each other and then figure out what we're going to do. And it goes back to there's a study, people study this called heuristics, where it's about, I see some people and I have to make a snap judgment about whether they're going to harm me or help me, whether they're friendly or not friendly. And this is how we survived back in the day, like when we were living in caves and eating the woolly mammoth steaks that we've just caught for lunch. And somebody would come across the hill towards us and we had to go, okay, good guys or bad guys, and we had to react. So we had to look at people and their outward facing characteristics. What they looked like told us what was likely to happen, and that's how we survived. And then fast forward to, I don't know, like maybe 1,000 years. And that had turned into a very prescriptive set of rules and regulations for how we were going to live. So if you were a certain age in, let's say, medieval France, you were a young woman of a certain age, you had a role that was expected of you. You had to be making babies by a certain age. And a young man at a certain age had a role that he was supposed to do. And if you were rich, there were things to do. And if you were poor, there was a place in society's strata that was yours. And everybody kind of knew what their role was. Demographics were your destiny. Now, fast forward another, I don't know, 2,000 years. Here we are still using this same system to look at people and say, well, men, they're all like this, and women, they're all like that, and young people, they're all like this, and old people, they're all like that. That's what we do when we're demographically profiling a target audience. We're putting them into groups based on the way we used to have to behave to survive. But then along came this crazy kooky thing called technology, and made it possible for all of us to kind of curate our lives however we'd like. And now we don't have to follow those rules anymore. Nobody acts their age anymore. I don't run around acting like a male who's 57 years old. And like, I don't stand in a store and say, which of these things am I going to buy? Let me check my demographic. You know what? Here's the line. Nobody cares about their demographics except marketers. People don't care about their demographics, only marketers do. And so it's time for a new system. It's time for a different way for us to think about people. As marketers, what we're here to do is try and engage people. So how do we get people engaged? How do people decide to do things today? Well, it all comes down to our values. And this is a neurological truth. Our brains are hardwired. It is chemistry that we're going to chase anything that aligns with our core values and run away from anything that's going to be bad or harm our core values. We don't have a choice. That's just being human. So therefore, long-winded answer to a very short question. Demographics died off as a useful way to think about people a long, long time ago. And if we're going to be good marketing folks, good business people, good HR people, whatever your game is, you need to know what people value, because that's how they make every decision in their life.
And people don't see themselves as a demographic. Like if you said to me, I, am I my age? I act like 20 years younger my age. I do things like I still skateboard to the mailbox. I don't feel that would depict me very well in my category. So I'm wondering also if there's a bit of decisive, if you think of political environment, decisiveness of creating the wrong sort of metric where people see each other as, and also marketers, it's putting them in a box that's not serving them anyways, because people aren't reacting to it, because they're wondering why people aren't responding to it. It's because somehow their messaging is not relating to their values. How do you see this research sort of bringing to life the way that marketers can, politics, I think, is one answer, but marketing in general, how does this change the game in terms of results?
Okay, well, let's first off, let's just finish to answer that question. Killing demographics, good and dead. So I'm going to give you some stats. We've done 750,000 surveys around the world now, qual-quant long-form surveys, and a team of translators helping me with this in 152 different languages. And we're built this database for the world that's accurate in 180 out of about 185 countries, depending on whose war is winning what and what day of the week we're at. So roughly speaking, a record of what everybody on the planet cares about for the whole human species. More statistically accurate than you need for a PhD from Harvard. And demographically, we collected this data in a way that it's representative of the demographics of the population of planet Earth. And so we can look at demographics and we can say, let's just look at baby boomers, for example, or Gen Z. Everybody's picking on Gen Z right now. So let's look at Gen Z and say, how often do folks with that label, how similar are they? In other words, from a marketing perspective, how targetable are they as a group? Well, if we look at all the different things we've measured, and primarily these values that drive how they make decisions, any different label, any one of those demographic labels, on average, they agree with each other about 10.5%. So you got about a 10% possible success rate if you're thinking about your audience based on a demographic profile. This explains why When we send out a direct mail campaign or a direct email campaign and we get a 3 or 4% response rate, we think we've just hit the freaking lottery, because 3 or 4% is enormous. That's a 96 or 97% fail rate, my friends.
But it's been accepted. That's the
Yeah,
accepted norm they get
you're just
excited
like,
about. The
that's
norm is now
cool.
changed to, yeah.
Yeah, because the best you could hope for is 10%. If you were perfect, you're not perfect. So it's somewhere below that. Even adding in our plus or minus 3.5% level of accuracy, it all kind of makes sense. That's why we get such low response rates to things. So demographics, they do not work. They're still a useful wayfinding system, because frankly speaking, some people are going to buy reading glasses at a certain age and others will not at another age, right? So you still need to know the demographics of your target audience, but they don't tell you anything about who they are. They just tell you what they are on the outside. That's it. That's all you can get from them. So to get to the who you are, we need to get into their values. And I think that what this does, your question 10 minutes ago when you asked it, sorry, was how is this going to be a game changer? Well, what it means is we can stop guessing. Here's a great way to think about it. You know the phrase fast friends, right? You meet somebody, you're for the first time, maybe you're on a trip or you're away on a conference or something, and you just click. You just like, you feel like you've known each other for 1,000 years, right? You're just like best friends all of a sudden. And you could suddenly, that person could say to you some crazy out of the norm thing, like, hey, let's go bungee jumping this afternoon. And you'd be like, absolutely. That sounds like the coolest thing I've never thought I would ever do. And then if the next thing that happens is that that person says, I've got this terrible thing going on in my life. I'm in the middle of a divorce, or somebody I know and love is dying of cancer or whatever. You'd know how to make them feel okay. You'd know how to talk to them because you've clicked, you've connected like that. Now imagine if you could scale that, if you could talk to all your prospects that way, if you could get into their hearts like that and connect at that deep human resonant level and be fast friends with all of your employees, your prospects, your customers, your client, maybe your competitors, prospects and clients, you could take over the world if you could connect to people at that level. That's what we're talking about here. By just switching out how we think about our target audiences, we go from 10.5% targetable to using values as a way to put people into buckets and pitch things at them. We get up to about an 80 or 90% similarity, cohesion within the groups that we can create. It's insanely powerful. And even if it's half wrong and it's not an 8x, it's only a 4x, or it's 3/4 wrong and it's only a 2x, and all you got to do is change how you think about people, why in the world wouldn't you do it?
So when the example you gave, like values, that's when someone's making fast friends, you connect on values, you're like, oh yeah, you kind of get me.
Yeah.
Then next step where they'd suggest something you haven't thought of, isn't that based on trust? Because now I feel like I trust you because we share the values? Or is it because if we have these values, chances are that actually is hitting my value too? Which of the two was it, or both?
It's kind of a little bit of both, I think. If you find someone whose
Yeah.
values align with yours, your trust with the trust you have for that person and that they have in you is going to be off the charts higher, faster. I mean, you could end up trusting somebody who you don't have total values alignment with. Of course you could. It's just going to take a lot longer because there isn't that sort of visceral reaction to it. It's just to that person or to that message. Let's talk about it in terms of brands. We're talking about marketing today. So, if a brand, we've all seen this, right? We've all seen something that we haven't encountered before and we're just like, wow, that's the thing I need. Who knew that? Like, just you just used the phrase they get me. That's the thing for me. You trust that company. You're not going to be like, never heard of you guys before. Wonder where you're from. I'm going to flip this over and read the instructions and the directions and the contents, and I'm going to do a little research. You're just like, no, I'm in. This is for me.
It's like a tipping point. When you have values and you see that there's values there, if you suggest something new, I'm already bought in. So I don't have to be as discerning about the next recommendation because we already share that.
Yeah.
Trust is there. So, for example, I don't have to read the the packaging of the next Apple phone, because I already trust it's going to be, they share my values and what they want for tech or whatever, right? As an example, maybe a poor one, but is that kind of what you're saying? Because that's kind of makes sense to me.
It's absolutely what they're saying, what I'm saying. So the one of the folks who has been a big help in my new book, or helped write the foreword, Dr. Martha Rogers, who is half of the Peppers and Rogers duo that anybody in the marketing world, if you don't know who those two are, you probably should know yourself.
Legends, my
Yeah.
mentors. Yes.
So Dr. Martha is her study, her research at Duke for the last little while has been on the issue of, I don't want to butcher this, I'm just going to say trust. There's a fancier, more academic way to say this, but what she's basically done is figured out how to go to an organization and say, listen, your consumers have said to us that if you do this, this, and this, your trustability score goes up. And if you do this, this, and this, and your trustability score goes up, it's going to cost you. We've done some work with your team, and it's going to cost you like X number of dollars to implement those things. What we also know from our research is that if you do those things and your trustability score goes up and you've spent that money to make that happen, your consumers were saying to us that they're willing to pay X% more for that, which will net you this. And it's inevitably far higher, a much bigger number than the number you had to spend in order to get there. So using trust as a metric in order to figure out how companies can be more efficient and more focused on what it is they're offering and what they're doing, I think it's just one piece of the puzzle, because trust will be engendered from values alignment. There's other values that we're going to be able to add to that mix. It's why Dr. Martha and I've bonded around this notion that there are things that we can't see that are driving the way people will behave, and how we're willing to, not just which decisions we're willing to make, but how we're willing to make them. I will pay more for something that aligns with my values than something that doesn't. And that's a fuzzy, beautiful, philosophical, poetic thing to say. But if we can make it empirical data, now we've got something that organizations love, because, let's face it, boardrooms eat data. If you walk into a boardroom and you don't have data, as a marketer, I used to have my own marketing company. I know how this goes. You walk in, I've got the best idea in the world. Well, where's the data to back it up? It's just a good idea. You need to trust me. It's brilliant. Okay, but where's the data? It's a hard sell, right? Marketers have a really hard time trying to sell great ideas because there's no empirical proof that it's going to work. But what if there was? What if we were able to say this is going to work because we can point to the value graphics of your audience, and we know that the needle will move if we talk to them about these things, not those things.
I think that's why this book is so important. Like when I was going through your book, I mean, it is no easy read, because the first bit is incredible, forward, of course, but like the amount of data that you provide to back this up is this is like a resource to be able to go in and really think about differently. If I think of marketers trying to pitch themselves, a lot of times they'd had it right. You're correct. They just didn't have the data to back it up. They were going, we need to expand trust. We need to have a brand be on the forward foot, but they had no way of measuring it. So thereby which it gets de-escalated as a priority. So the work with Martha and what you're talking about, I think, is absolutely critical. How does values get measured?
How do we measure them? Well, there's different ways you can do it. I mean, I'll tell you what we've done. We've gone and built this giant data set, the 750,000 surveys from around the world, and it's a statistically representative sample of the population of the planet. And so we have this global resource of who everybody is inside their hearts. And it's infinitely segmentable. And what we've done in the book is we've said, you know what, we can't... For our clients, we do custom research. So we will, for a brand, for a target audience, for a competitor's brand, for a workforce, whoever you want to understand and engage and motivate, we go and profile them and use this database, and we come back with super accurate information. You can't do that in a book because that's custom research, right? But in the book, what we have done is we've put in a quiz, a quick little 15-question quiz. You can send that out to whoever you want. Use SurveyMonkey or, I don't know, Survey Orangutan, whatever your app is that you're using to question folks and send out surveys. You ask them the question, Ask them these questions, and then there's a little scoring sheet in there and tells you how to figure it out. And it points you to one of 15 chapters in the book where we spill our guts, everything we know about one of the 15 biggest archetypes, the 15 biggest tribes, if you will, inside the Valuegraphics database. And in that chapter, we tell you, here's the values that are important to them. Here's how you can use them. Here's some tools you need to understand in order to be able to connect the dots between your product, your service, your brand, and the values that they're going to respond to. So it's a great first step forward. I like to say sometimes it's like playing the piano with your fists, right? I mean, it's not super accurate like custom research, but man, oh man, you're on the right instrument. You're playing the Valuegraphics piano. So it won't be pretty, but it's gonna get you a lot further than continuing to rely on demographics and psychographics alone. I mean, all the psychographic data we've been collecting as marketers for all these years about people's past purchase behavior and their emotional index and their brand preferences, and that's all great stuff, but it doesn't get you into the future because it's all about the past. It's all about how they have behaved and what they did and how they felt and what they prefer, not how to get them to change that behavior or those preferences or whatever it is you're trying to get them to do. So you still need demographics as a way to put a fence around your target audience. Got to understand that reading glasses, that you're not going to sell these reading glasses to 18-year-old girls who work at the grocery store. You got to sell these to the right age group. And let's say they're made out of white gold. So they're going to be rich old folks, and they're made for a man's face. So these are rich old guy reading glasses. Good to know. All rich old reading guys are not the same. Rich old reading guys? Rich old guys who need reading
I understood.
are not all the same. So demographically, you got a group. Psychographically, you might know that they buy a pair of reading glasses every 3 months because they keep losing them and breaking them and forgetting them in their friends' cars when they're on a road trip to the Okanagan. I'm just speaking like hypothetically, of course. I wouldn't know anybody who's in those situations. And then, so that's good stuff to know. And lastly, if you're really trying to be a good marketing strategist here, you can't just look at their past behavior and a description of who they are. You need to understand what's going to get them to say yes. Let's say the values that you find for a group that you're interested in chasing are all about personal growth and ambition. You need to talk to them about those reading glasses in that frame. Not glasses frame, but marketing frame. You need to talk to them and say, these glasses are going to make you a better version of yourself. And these glasses are going to help you. Your friends will be impressed by these. So this is about ambition, social standing, personal growth. And because you spent so much money on these, you're not going to lose them. These ones are the ones you're going to look after and you're going to keep. So you're actually being environmentally friendly here. And so that helps you justify the cost. So that little valuegraphic profile I just made up off the top of my head, that's going to apply across the board to a certain segment of the demographic that you're talking to. Instead of spewing as many things as you can think of for reading glasses and hoping something sticks, you know what you have to say. You have to talk about those things somehow, and it's going to work, as opposed to might work, might not. Let's give it a shot and see what goes.
Now, you mentioned archetypes, and I'm curious if you could describe some of those archetypes. There was, I think, how many did you say, 30?
There's 15.
15, sorry. 15 archetypes. And could you describe like a couple of them, and just so we can kind of get a sense of what is an archetype and why are they so important? Because I'm really fascinated by, if I think of archetype and brand design, are you the lover brand, the explorer, a hero? That's a great way for a brand to position itself, and there's a weighting scale to picking how many of you are of each. Archetype in terms of the client, that's or your audience, that's really fascinating. What does that look like from this perspective?
Yeah. So first off, we have to explain this. I have to kind of tell you how we came up with these. And for that, I always talk about Halloween candy. Because who doesn't like Halloween candy? That's a good thing. So imagine you kids come home from Halloween and they got a big giant pillowcase full of candy, or at least they did back when I was a kid. I don't know if anybody even goes out for Halloween anymore, but work with me here. So you have this pillowcase full of candy, you dump it out on the dining room table and you look at it. You go, wow, it's a big pile of candy. Let's see how we can sort this into piles. There's some gum and there's chocolate bars. Oh, full-size chocolate bars. And then there's some things on sticks. We'll call them lollipops and suckers, and some of them are toffee and whatever. So you can start to put them into piles based on what you see in front of you. You don't go in advance knowing what the piles are going to be. You look at the data, and the data tells you how you're going to sort it out. And then within each of those piles, the chocolate bars, there's a bunch of different kinds of chocolate bars. So the pile is just like a category in which there's a whole bunch of other individual kinds of things, right? So these 15 archetypes, that's the 15 piles of data that we found after looking at 750,000 survey responses about all kinds of stuff we asked people about. And we're able to sort it into these 15 piles. And in every case, the reason why a pile exists is because of some kind of similarity that they have, each of these individual responses. So the chocolate bars, they're all similar. They're all different, but they're all chocolate bars, right? So within one of these big piles, for example, are people who are all driven by their creativity. A massively creative group of people. They have very similar values, wants, needs, expectations around all kinds of things. But what keeps them as a group is the fact that this creativity rules their lives. This is the chocolate bars, lots of different kinds of chocolate bars going on in there, but it's chocolate bars. So within any one of these archetypes, lots of different kinds of people. And that's what we get into when we start doing custom research for clients. But at this Uber level, what we're able to share is what makes the chocolate bar pile similar to each other. Here's a group that I like to talk about because it's maybe an easy one for many people to get their head around. We just call them the workers. Now, in my last book, this same group showed up, but we called them the workaholics. And it's a perfect story because my friends who fit this category told me that we had to change the name because they hated the icks. Said that makes me sound like I'm a drug addict or an alcoholic. And I love my job. This is not an addiction. Like, so why make me feel bad about being a hardworking, upstanding citizen who pays his taxes?
In fact, it could be mission driven.
Yeah. So the workers, some of the characteristics that we know about this group, unlike many other tribes, many other archetypes, ways of being with other people are less important. Most people want to be with other people somehow, and these guys do too, but it's further down the list. More important than that are things like ambition and personal growth and social standing. These are folks who tend to self-report that they work as many as 80 hours a week. Now, we know that the workers archetype, they're lying about that because part of their status, part of their social standing is like, I work 80 hours a week and I only sleep 2 minutes every night and I don't even need food. I just work. That's part of how they measure up against each other. So that 80 hours a week, I don't really care if they're lying to me or not. What it says to me as a sociological data guy is that they believe they're working at least that hard. And so it helps me understand the way they look at the world and the way they make their decisions. So pitching this group of people, just to keep it simple, we'll just talk about the stuff I've shared so far. So pitching them with a thing that's about, hey, we're all in this together and this is going to be great for your family and you and your community of pals who get together. It's not just going to fall on deaf ears because it's just not all that important to them. Talking to them, however, about how something's going to help them get the promotion, get the corner office, do the things that they need to do with their work. It isn't always about the sort of Gordon Gekko versions of being a worker. It could just be about, you want to get your next book out the door, don't you, David? Well, in order to do that, you need this. Like, okay, yeah, cool. I absolutely want to get my next book out the door. So I'm in. Yeah, that's just a really brief and, punchy kind of overview.
So the chocolate bar group,
yeah.
When you look at that group, there's different chocolate bars within the chocolate category. Do they share the same values in the archetype, or is there multiple values within an archetype?
There's 56 values in total, and the archetypes tend to be coalesced around a similar set of them and a similar ranking. And that's why they're a group, right? There's some variable, in this case, how hard you work. That's not a value, but that's a variable where when that's present, those 56 values tend to be magnetically in a little cloud around that particular variable. The important thing to think about, though, with these categories is that the point that there's a lot of difference inside each of these buckets is really important. So if you're going to use the book, the reason we made it a do-it-yourself book and gave you the quiz and gave you all this information is we just want as many people as possible to go out there and start have a values-driven view of themselves and the world and their clients and everybody they're trying to impact. But it's important to remember that it's not that easy. 15 tribes does not help us understand humans with the level of nuance that's necessary to really understand human behavior. Human behavior is a messy, irrational, emotional mess. And that's why using traditional data to try and understand people is nonsense. Let's think about some of the traditional data you might have in a boardroom when you're working at Nike. You're going to find out that this group of people we've been tracking, they bought a pair of sneakers last week. Cool. That doesn't mean they're going to buy sneakers next week. Or even if they said to you that they're going to buy your brand next week, they go off and do something else instead. People don't do the things they say. They behave in all kinds of crazy ways. So trying to use empirical, logical, rational, economic data to understand people is a bit of a fool's game. It's a good starting point, but unless you also understand what's driving people and then apply that to your logic, you're not going to see the patterns in the noise, not as easily as when you see why people are doing things. It's Simon Sinek. Simon's been running around for a decade now, making millions of dollars, just going, why? And all the power to him for figuring out a way to monetize one word. But what we've been able to do is turn that into data. This is the why of your audience, yourself, whoever it is you're trying to understand.
So in the example of the worker, and this my hallucination is, so I'm hallucinating thinking there's 2 chocolate bars in that category. One is the worker that's trying to further themselves financially, and the other person that's actually mission driven. Totally 2 different values, but yet they're still the worker. Is that what you're saying? Like sort of like that's the nuance?
Yeah. And then there'll be subsets of both of those, and there'll be subsets of those subsets. I mean, there's potentially hundreds of thousands of, if not millions of different, very, very specific profiles that can come out of 750,000 surveys across 56 values in 180 countries, and never mind the other 380 things we asked about, questions about wants and needs and expectations. There's 436 metrics times 750,000 people. You do the math and then imagine, if you're going to pull things out of there, how many different possible permutations and combinations there will be. There's a lot of different kinds of chocolate bars in the chocolate bar category. But some of them, even within the chocolate bar category, some of them will be full size. Some of them will have a caramel center. Some of them will be, have nuts. Some will have no nuts. So there's going to be groups within the group. And then within each of those groups, there's going to be smaller, and just keeps going and going and going, right?
So if I'm a company and I say, these are our values.
The book's really going to get you down the road in a great direction. That's, I don't want it to sound like it's not worth the effort, because it really is. It's really going to help.
Oh yeah, no, this book is great.
Point you in a good direction.
Yeah. If I'm a business and I got value, I'm like, say, hey, these are our values. We stand for these things. This is what we're doing. This is what we're espousing. Why is that probably not enough? Because I think a lot of companies will go, well, I know what my values are. How does this really make a difference? And I think that's what's we need to connect the dots for people, because this does. Because just because you say you have the values, there's like that, what's like you called it, the unseen, the things you can't see. This is what uncovering that. Tell me a little bit more about that, because I think that's going to bring light to the value of this, the importance of this.
Yeah, I think, sorry, there's something in my eye. I think my next book might be called 6 Vice Presidents and a Box of Donuts, because it's a catchy title. And it's how most companies have gone about finding their values. Some have done it a little bit more scientifically than that, but many haven't. You lock some people in a room, you throw them a box of donuts, and you say, don't come out of there until you got some nice words that we can put up on the wall behind the receptionist, and then we can forget about them. You might have gone to the trouble of hiring a company to come in who sends around a survey to your staff and says, what are your values? There's actually a methodology that I've been talking to some friends in another sector of the business world about, that where they use flashcards, and they hold out flashcards and go, is that one of your values? Is that one of your values? Is that one of your values? And that's how they figure out values. It's like, there are so many methodological flaws in that. It's insane. People are going to answer what they think you want to hear, whether they're doing it intentionally or not. I mean, who's going to say that in the environment is not one of their values? Come on.
Or integrity.
Or integrity, or family.
That's like
or
such a
yeah. I work at the ad agency. Is creativity one of your values? No, not for me. So you can't get to truth if you're using 6 vice presidents and a box of donuts methodology to figure out what your values are. And more importantly, all you're doing, no matter whether you send a little internal survey around or not, all you're doing is picking some pretty words with all good intentions and putting them up on the wall and saying, that's what we're about. But to truly understand the values of an organization, you need to know 5 different things. You need to understand the values of your employees, because that's a big part of how you're going to determine the corporate values. You need to understand the values of your customers, and you hope to see that there's some alignment there. You need to understand the values of your vendors, your partners, the other people that you would like to have part of your ecosystem. In many cases, you also need to understand the values of your shareholders. I mean, because for the longest time, what's the purpose of business? Increase shareholder value. So you better figure out what their values are too. And then lastly, what about the communities that you are impacting? Whether you are impacting them well or not, or just inadvertently, you are impacting a community by the very fact that you are an organization. So there's 5 different stakeholder groups. And if you get their values sorted, you'll see some overlap. Think about it like 5 Venn circles. They're all going to crisscross in certain places. And those couple of values, maybe there's 3, if you're lucky, there's 4, that then becomes your North Star metric. Now you know how to make a decision about anything that comes along that will support, let's say, customers, but employees will love that you're supporting customers that way, and it'll be great for the community, and your shareholders will see why you're doing it. It's going to resonate because fast friends. So that's the ultimate way to do this, is to start using these tools and this way of looking at people to understand what they all have in common, and then make that the values of your organization.
That makes so much sense.
It does,
really
doesn't
does.
it?
When you think about what's that?
It does, doesn't it? It's just like, why? Yeah, it's the biggest comment I get from people when we start talking about this is, why hasn't anybody done this before? And I'm like, I've yet to find an answer for that. I don't know either.
That's why this is so important, this work. One of the questions I have for you is people buy, when they buy on values, is it possible, like, what a lot of marketers are trying to shoot for, like an emotional response, and they're connecting with your passions and we'll say your values. But when you really connect deeply with someone's values, isn't it fair to say that you can become an irrational purchaser?
Oh, for sure.
And I think of, what's that?
For sure. Like the entire luxury
that's where the juice is.
Yeah, the entire luxury industry is based on this. Like so many industries are based on, like, don't make this a logical, rational, economic decision. Just because something is the same quality and a little bit cheaper, a rational economist view of data would say, well, that's the one that's going to win. But we know it's not. It's the one that's going to win is the one that connects to people. And that's been a bit of a crapshoot. Like, okay, ours is going to be a little bit more expensive, same quality, but a little bit more expensive. How do we get people to say yes? Well, we got to tell them this. We got to tell them that. We got to hire so-and-so to be our spokesmodel. We got to, who knows? We're going to keep trying here until we click on something. And if you're lucky enough as a brand to stick it out for 20 or 30 years, eventually you'll know now, okay, we know what works. We know what doesn't. But why not just know that from day one? Why not that 20 or 30 year time span it takes until you're Coca-Cola and you're like, we got it sorted. We know what moves the needle. Even Coca-Cola is running around guessing, okay, well, what do we do next? We need another brand ad for next year's big brand campaign. What should we focus on? We can tell them now. We can say, this is the thing you need to be focused on. How you tell the story is still up to you. People in marketing sometimes get a little freaked out about this because they don't want a database to tell them what to do. It doesn't. It just tells you what direction to head. So you're not heading off in some path down over there somewhere into the, mysterious, nasty swamp. You're actually going in the direction you should. And how you get there, though, that's still all about creativity and experience and intuition. But you're doing it, that's the right direction to go because the data says. So now you get the freedom of being creative around the right direction instead of wasting all that good creative juices that we have on stuff that's not going to work.
It's like that saying, storytelling or truth told well. It's this is a truth. Values are a truth to the person. And what a lot of companies are talking about is they're doing emotional chase with trends. It's not trends, not truths. It's a big difference. And I think what the values, when you're thinking about that for them, that doesn't, your values don't change. Your values don't change overnight. The trend does.
Yeah.
That's why I think that this is so invaluable, because it has a sustainability factor to it.
Yeah.
A lot of, people that are chasing data or trends, that's what I don't want people to think and trip up. Why I feel it's so important is because the investment of this has I think, a further trajectory for a longer period of time that may not ever change.
It
Look
won't.
at Patagonia.
Well, Patagonia is a great example, right? I mean, the biggest values-driven mic drop in history is Yvon Chouinard giving the company to the planet. Those
It's
folks
aligned with the values.
One of the biggest value, we did a study of Patagonia versus North Face to see what was going on between those two brands. And Patagonia, lots of things I could tell you, but one thing that stood out like a sore thumb compared to Gen Pop and compared to North Face customers is the value of personal responsibility. People who are attracted to that brand want to feel like they're moving the needle and they're making things happen around the stuff that they want to see change, which is clearly things about sustainability and the environment. And so he comes along and does that. He has cemented those people. They are never going to stray. And they're going to be the first thing they need a new pair of socks. Like, does Patagonia sell socks? No. Okay. I can go buy socks from somewhere else. They're never going to leave. All the other brands the next morning after that announcement, I hope they all woke up and went like, oh, damn. Well, that's the game over there. We're never stealing any share from those guys ever again. And we better make sure that ours are locked down tight. Now, North Face, by comparison, one of the values there that I thought was really interesting, didn't expect, this is the kind of stuff we find when we do these profiles, is the value of creativity. People who are attracted to North Face are attracted to anything that is about being creative or displays of other people's creativity. So I thought about that one for a while, and I was like, well, how does that make sense in my world? I live in Vancouver, which many people refer to as Hollywood North because of all the film work that happens up here. There's a film set on every corner, it seems, particularly when I'm in a rush trying to get somewhere and they're all in my way. And if you look at the crew working on these film sets outside in Vancouver rain, they're all wearing North Face. So I'm like, isn't that interesting? These people in this incredibly creative industry are drawn to the North Face brand. And now it's anecdotal, but if I was the vice president of marketing of North Face and I had that data point, which if that is you, you're welcome. You can take that and give me a call. I got some more for you. I'd be out there trying to find everything I could that has anything to do with creativity in the outdoors. Now, I know you're based in Alberta. So a great example is up at the Banff School of Fine Arts up at in Banff, at the Banff Center. They have the Banff Mountain Film Festival every year, where the best mountain films, which is a whole category of filmmaking, it's their Academy Awards. People from all over the world send their films into the Banff Mountain Film Festival. I'd be the title sponsor of that. I'd want to have all my senior executives there. I'd want the CEO to do the welcoming broadcast to everybody who's there and who ends up watching what happens at the award ceremony. It would be an amazing sponsorship opportunity that I doubt North Face would even have considered unless they knew that creativity was moving the needle for their customers.
Well, you can see that in their sponsorship with movies, the type of movies that they sponsor. Because my background was filming documentary series in the backcountry heli skiing, cat skiing, so I was really
well, then you know all about this stuff.
The riders.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the cool thing with North Face, you're bang on because they do these collaborations with Gucci and stuff. That's very creative, where you would never see Patagonia doing that. And to the same, I guess, values discussion is I remember being in the guide hut when I'm working at, I used to do the marketing for Cat Skin Alex in Canada, but also for a cat operation. And I remember the lead guide was bragging about that he got his jacket back that he's had for 15 years or something. And he goes, and it's a jacket that they have a lifetime warranty.
Yeah.
And if you mail it in, they'll fix the zippers. And it's like, he's like, you should see this thing. He viewed the fact that they fixed it, and you can see like the stitching, like a little bit, like it was beautifully done, but it's
Yeah.
still, it was almost like the longer he had it, the more he valued this jacket, and
Yeah.
that the company that he didn't go and buy a new jacket, that he bought this original jacket, and it's still 15 years later, it's his favorite backcountry hiking jacket. That it's just battle torn, but it's still at the same time, it's like still in great shape. It's a good product. Like, and for him, what he valued was they were fell through with their promise of lifetime warranty. We'll fix it or replace it. And here he is. He would take it out of his dead cold hands. He wouldn't want to replace it. He's like, I'll still keep it because he would love that his
Yeah.
original product. That was
Amazing.
him wanting to also care about the environment. It's very
Yeah,
interesting.
it is. Now, you mentioned a minute ago about the longevity of this stuff. I want to just touch on that for a second. That, values never change. So unlike demographics, you understand the demographics of your target audience. Well, half of them are going to wake up tomorrow and they're not going to be 18, 24-year-old anymore. They're going to be 25 to 36, or they got a promotion. So they left the $50,000 and under wealth category, and now they're making $60,000. So demographics are moving and bobbing and weaving all the time. Psychographics, I love your brand, and then I had a bad experience. I hate your brand, and I bought the shoes last week. It doesn't mean I'm going to buy the shoes next week. And so it's all, it's all over the place. It's not really stable. But values, you get your values when you're in your late childhood and early adolescence, and they are locked. We are not an octopus. You don't get to chop off a value and grow another one later on just because something happened that you don't like. So once you know the value graphics of your target audience, that's unchanging. So you can rely on that data forever. A generation from now, you'll need to redo your work and figure out what the new and as people come into your, new people coming in, of course, you're going to have to understand how their values. But if you're still hammering on the same set of values, the only reason people will become new customers of yours is because their values have drawn them there. Remember, that's the only way humans know how to make decisions. It's how our brains are wired. So if you know your values, you speak to your values, it's solidifying your base. It's going to drive more people who have those values into your customer profile. And it just gets bigger and bigger because of values alignment is the flywheel that's driving this whole system here.
It's part of building a groundswell is like
Yeah,
values alignment. It's like 100% what my book's about. And now you actually mentioned your research in my book to this exact point. It's like this, the saying, right? A confused mind never buys. I think
yeah,
you put in your book the Disney quote, like it's easy to make decisions when you know what your values are. Well, that's
yeah.
the same with purchasing. When I know my values are aligned with this business that I'm working with, it's that it removes the obstacles and all the gobbledygook that we have to do to convince people to buy. That it becomes, now you can become more authentically, more beautiful yourself, not trying to convince people to buy with gimmicks, discounts, and all these kind of things. That's why I think the value discussion and what you're doing, it also can create more profitability because now you can focus on the value you're delivering as opposed to convincing or discounting and the game that I think most businesses are on.
I agree. And here's the beautiful thing about values. There's many beautiful things, but to that point, when we're looking at our target, I talk about a loaf of bread. Looking at your target audience in a traditional way. You're like pulling out slices and going, I want men who have a college education and are 45 to 60 years old, and those are the slices I'm going to focus on. And then what you try and do is connect the dots and say, okay, how am I going to talk to these people? It's going to be based on some stereotypes I have in my head of what these slices of bread, how they're similar to each other. And as we've discussed, it's going to be about 10.5% accurate, give or take, because it's an average across all those different labels. But instead, if you slice the bread this way and you say, what's the things that people are attracted to about our particular product, brand, service, offering, whatever it is, that cut across all of those demographics? That's what values do. And what generally happens is you end up realizing that your loaf of bread is a baguette. You've got way more people that you had never considered to be part of your potential universe who are. And it's how you explain the oddball stuff that you see in the real world where, I go into, let's say, the Arc'teryx store down the street here. We've been talking on about North Face and Patagonia. So Arc'teryx, good Canadian brand, competing with both of those brands. You walk into that store, and I know for a fact that they do not consider half of the people in that store as part of their personas, part of their target audience. And yet here they are buying stuff. So why? Because baguette. Because they're there for a set of values. And the store and the brand is looking at this way and saying these slices instead of looking at it this way and realizing that there are 80-year-olds in there dropping money to buy a jacket. They're never going to go climb a mountain, but the brand alignment has brought them in there, or some combination of values has brought them in there, so that's the decision they've made. It's so much better for all of us. For the brands, the people who work in the brand, for the customers, for the kinds of products that we create in the world. If we stop using these ridiculous stereotypes about who people are based on how old you are, what you look like, how much pigment you have in your skin, whether you fall in love with men, you fall in love with women, you're married, you're single, who cares about any of that stuff? What I care about is what you care about. So if we can get to that level, now I'm going to create products that you care about. The world will gradually, eventually end up being full of products and services and brands that people actually give a fuck about, instead of stuff that we made because maybe someone will like it because 18 to 24-year-old men who earn $50,000 a year and have a college degree and are single, they're supposed to like this stuff. So let's make this thing. What if you knew what they cared about? We could get rid of all the junk that we're making. We could stop this overproduction mentality we have. And even more importantly, I think, if you sit and look at this from a macro level, what this is doing, if we continue to think about the world and all the people that we're trying to impact based on demographic categories, you naturally fall into stereotyping. You naturally, no matter how much data you have, you naturally fall into, well, my target audience are women. And therefore you're going to, no matter your best intent, you're going to end up making products for women. And you're going to make decisions that have some kind of stereotyping going on in that decision, or for young people, or for old people, or you're gay, you're straight, you're black, you're white, you're rich, you're poor. So you end up making decisions based on stereotypes. And those stereotypes, this is the insidious secret of marketing. Those stereotypes fuel the fires of racism and sexism and ageism and homophobia and all the rest of that list, because we're saying to the world and to ourselves that the right way to look at people is based on gender and whether they're black or white, and whether they're male or female, or whether they're young or old, whether they're male or female, that's the correct way to think about people. And it's not. It makes no sense in terms of accuracy and effectiveness inside our organizations. And it's just perpetuating myths that fuel these fires, these social issues that we're all grappling with and doing a pretty shitty job figuring out how to come out the other end with smiles, frankly. So it's not going to fix them, but it's certainly going to turn the volume down and maybe take away some of the fuel if we can start training ourselves to look at people based on what's in their hearts instead of what they look like on the outside. Let's go to the inside. We should be not thinking about the outside. Let's think about what's on the inside, in our hearts, where we can be fast friends with our clients, our customers, our staff. I think that's a much better, more fulfilling way for all of us to do our work and to lead our lives.
Masterfully putting a bow around how I started it, which was decisiveness in politics, how this actually could be really a groundswell for good beyond, just great business thinking. And, I think it's from a business standpoint, I think we're changing in the era of being product centric to being purpose centric. And that is what this values driven research is going to bring to life, is that businesses have sustainability and tremendous unseen growth possibility because people want to be part of things that share their values. And when we look
Oh,
at people in their hearts, what they value as humans, not as demographics, they're not customers, they're humans with all these complexities. What's in their heart is human, which is what do they value? What do they care about? And how can we make the world a better place by connecting with those values? I think this is just like has infinite possibilities and worthy of like another 2 hours of discussion. I just think it's just phenomenal. How can somebody, when looking at reading this book that you're just about to come out with, and and um, and they want to make an impact on their business, how would you coach them to kind of like either how to bring this research or this methodology or this book to make an impact? Because I think there's people listening that go, "This is amazing. How do I then influence my business or my peers, or if I'm the CEO,
yeah.
my organization to make change and start thinking differently like this?"
I'm going to give you a story, a framework here that should set anybody up to be able to get people to pay attention, because there's so much evidence all around us every single day right now of how values are the most powerful force on earth. And I don't say that lightly. I can't think of a single thing that's going on in the world right now where you can't draw a direct line back to it being about people reacting to the world based on their values. Let's look at, for example, social change. Things like DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, things like ESG, things like Black Lives Matter, things like LGBTQ rights, things like what's going on in the United States right now around gun control. All the different things that are happening around social change are about people following their values and en masse making things happen for good, for bad, for the indifferent. If you look at the future of work and the conversations we're having right now around going back to work or staying at home or being hybrid and about engaged workplace culture, that's all about people's values. Look, the future of leadership. Leaders today know that they have to be empathetic and that they have to have soft skills and they have to do active listening, and this is all about how do I understand the values of the people that I'm trying to lead. The future of retail, the future of branding. We've talked about Patagonia. I mean, the other side of that equation, look at Twitter. Twitter's having a full-on meltdown because somebody's in control now, where values are just flown out the window, which is an interesting way to talk about Twitter. Nice little metaphorical line up there. But Twitter is having some serious values-driven issues right now. The point being that there isn't anything going on in the world, let alone our little jobs, our little things we do as marketers. The whole world is about values right now. The values used to be something that we'd hear about in the news from time to time. Well, today they are the news. And I firmly believe we've left the experience economy, the sharing economy, the gig economy. We've left all that stuff behind, and we now live in the values economy. So if that's the case, and this is the most powerful force on earth. It's driving everybody in a very obvious way to do everything. And you're a business and you're not taking advantage of this. What are you doing? And in order to take advantage of this, as Peter Drucker famously said, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. You need to be able to measure it. So that's what Value Graphics brings to the table. That's what this book will allow you to do, is to start to measure, to set goals, to track progress, to figure out how the values of this group and that group overlap with each other. This is where the rubber hits the road. We've turned it into data. It's not just poetry anymore. It's not just pretty words behind the receptionist and little aluminum cutout letters on the wall. It's real, and it's data, and it's useful, and it's usable. It can correct a whole lot of problems in the world at the same time that it's making us a whole lot of money. There's no reason not to do this.
And we've been talking about forward values, and to me, it's like businesses that really create a groundswell, they create brand clarity, is when people know what they stand for. And when you know what you stand for, you also need to know what you stand against. Does this also identify away values, or sorry, yeah, like there's toward values, things I value, but what about things that I don't value or that I reject? Does this also bring to light those?
Yeah, that's going to be you running away from the values, that things that may harm your values. So, I mean, just make
Yeah.
a simple example. Family is a really important value to many, many, many people all over the world. And if something comes along, it's going to be great for your family. You're going to run towards it. And your prefrontal cortex will actually reward you when you get it. That's when you feel pleasure. It's when you feel happiness. It's when you feel joy. I got this thing. It's better for my family's going to benefit as a result. Even if it's happening in just little tiny hits, that's how your prefrontal cortex forces you to go chase that thing. And then something comes along might be bad for your family, even just mildly annoying for your family. Your prefrontal cortex has tools as well. It will make you feel stress and anxiety and even fear until you get that thing off the radar screen. So you are being ping-ponged around like this based on whether your prefrontal cortex is feeding you this set of chemicals or that set of chemicals to make every decision that possibly comes along. So all your behaviors, your emotions, everything you do will come from some combination of those 56 values, and how your prefrontal cortex is using them as a sortation system as you go through the rituals of daily life. It's like your internal GPS. We all have an internal GPS, and it's our values. And so understanding an entire group of people and saying, here's the GPS they're all using, like a school of fish like this, that's how we end up being able to make this all come to life. And yeah, I mean, I think the biggest, I haven't really thought about this and put it in these words before, but the fast forward 100 years from now, if we're able to convince big corporations and small corporations, people making things and putting them out there in the world to do values driven product development, the world's going to end up being full of really, really good things. And compared to right now, even just that would be a really nice legacy to know that I've helped to push out there into the world.
Oh yeah, this is how important this is. If you think about when you own a car, so I bought a new car recently, bought a Porsche, and now I see Porsches everywhere. It's like we find things that it's like we're finding the pattern, and I think that values could be the same thing. When you see something that's shared with your values, you're just going to automatically, oh, that's something I value. You're looking, your brain is looking for things that align with your values, like you said, like families and so forth. And that to me is what is drawing me to your work. It's because one of my values is looking for growth that creates exponential growth sustainably. My way value is short-term trend growth, which is like sometimes can be called growth hacking, or people that are chasing anything for growth's sake, but it's not sustained. And so that's why I think that this work is so important, because it's so critical to understand this, because it's sustainable growth. It's like got lasting. It's got the type of thing that also can create growth for good, meaning you don't have to cajole, you don't have to interrupt. You can magnify, draw people to you because you share values. And I think that's why this work is so important, at least in my work. And that's why I've honored you in my book as well. And I just love this conversation with you. I want to do another one, and I know I want to work with you more in the type of work. What sort of last parting words would you have for somebody that's listening, in terms of why this is important for the brand and to act now?
Well, I think like any new way of looking at things, uh, the early adopters are going to be the ones who benefit the most. If we want to just talk about it from a greed perspective, get in first, and start being the one who goes to your clients and goes to your prospects and says, listen, there's a better way. There's a better way to do stuff that's good for you, help you make more money, and will help the planet. So becoming values driven is a wonderful way to navigate to what I like to call the intersection of profit and purpose. If you can find that intersection, you're doing the work you should be doing, and you're doing it for the right reasons. But how do you get there? You got to have a set of rules to follow that'll take you there and show you what direction to head. And that's values. So a values driven path to purpose and profitability is really what you're going to be able to do for yourself and offer to everybody if you grab this right now. And how to do that? Well, the book is called The Death of Demographics. You'll be able to find it on Amazon by the time this airs. So go buy a copy of that. And that's not me shilling. Anybody who's written a book and put it up on Amazon knows you might make about $1 a book. So, I got to sell a whole lot of books to be able to afford to, go for a nice dinner. So it's not about that. It's about everybody getting this quiz in their hands, getting this understanding of how to do this work on their own. It's a do-it-yourself book, and starting to be values driven in the way that they live their lives and do their work. You can get more information from following me on LinkedIn. That's where I tend to live. I'm on the other social tools too, but LinkedIn's kind of
What's the
home base.
URL they can find you at?
URL, you can find me, on LinkedIn.
On LinkedIn or just your URL if you have one.
Website. I got two websites you can go to. One is valuegraphics.com. And that's the research company. And then my website that's about my books and my public speaking work is davidallisoninc.com. Yeah, I'd love to be connected to whoever's listening and finds this intriguing. The more people we can get focused on talking about this stuff, the more of a groundswell we can build. We can start to make the world a little bit of a better place while we're making ourselves an extra buck or two at the same time.
Love it. Thank you so much for being on the show. This is such a great work, and to be able to talk about this in depth just before your book release is just a fantastic opportunity.
Lots of fun. Thanks for having me over. Nice to see you.
You bet. And thanks everyone for listening. This is another episode of the Groundswell Origins podcast. If you have some comments on this and you want me to pass on even your voicemail on to David, just leave it in my, go to groundswell.fm. There's a little link there called SpeakPipe. You can just click and send me a message. Tell me what you like, what you don't like, what values. Tell me whatever you like, and I'll even pass on David if you have a question for him. And until next time, mahalo.